This video tells the chilling story of the 3 Million Gang from Kroonstad, a ruthless group that terrorized the community and waged war against ANC Youth League members. It all began with the betrayal. Daniel George, once a trusted friend and comrade, turned against Diti Ramasimong in the most unforgivable way. After Diti had given refuge to Daniel and other ANC Youth League members, hiding them from the police, Daniel repaid him with treachery. He had an affair with Diti's wife. That act of betrayal set off a chain reaction of bloodshed that would engulf Kroonstad, with the 3 Million Gang at the center of the violence. Now in this video, we delve into the rise and fall of the 3 Million Gang, a deadly hit squad that targeted comrades and left a trail of terror in its wake.
An adultery and a man with a sharp sense of revenge sparked off political passions that had a Free State community in an iron grip of violence. Township in Kroonstad is as small as its passions are large. George Ramasimong, better known as Diti, went into battle with the ANC Youth League after learning that his wife Alice was having an affair with one of its leading members, a man in hiding from the police whom Diti had sheltered at his house. It was a personal conflict that, by all accounts, was soon exploited by the South African police.
In die oggend het Diti weer opgedag en vir my gesê, ek sê het is baie seer, die komries wat die vir hulle alles gemaak het in sy huis, nou vat hulle sy vrou, daar is onreg.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, just after the unbanning of political parties, South African townships became battlegrounds for ruthless gangsterism. Vigilante gangs led by merciless ghetto warlords emerged in large numbers, spreading terror across their communities. While these gangs were known for their brutality, they had a particular vendetta against community activists, allied with the African National Congress and the United Democratic Front. In Kroonstad, one such gang reigned supreme, the infamous 3 Million Gang. Initially, they were just a tight-knit group of friends, recognized for their sharp fashion sense and skills on the dance floor. But as power struggles erupted, they clashed with rival groups, battling for dominance. At first, these confrontations were minor, mere scuffles over territory and reputation. But as the township descended into chaos, so did they. During this time, the ANC's youth in the area were waging their own war, one of resistance against the apartheid regime. They took to the streets in a fiery defiance, targeting municipal councillors whom they saw as apartheid collaborators. Their methods were relentless. They used intimidation, arson, and protest. Some councillors saw their homes reduced to ashes. The youth also fiercely opposed Bantu education and fought against rising municipal rent costs, further fueling the unrest that gripped the townships in those turbulent years. At first, members of the 3 Million Gang were part of the ANC Youth League. They stood shoulder to shoulder with activists, resisting the apartheid regime. But everything changed when betrayal struck at the heart of their brotherhood. When some Youth League members were on the run from the police, Diti, a member of the 3 Million Gang and a trusted ANC comrade, offered them refuge in his home, promising to shelter them until the heat died down. But as they hid under his roof, one of them, a man named Daniel George, made a fatal mistake. He had an affair with Diti's wife. The truth didn't stay buried for long, and when Diti found out, rage consumed him. That betrayal was the spark that ignited a bloodbath in Maokeng in Kroonstad. Diti refused to take the humiliation laying down. He turned the 3 Million Gang into a ruthless militant force, driven by vengeance. Sensing an opportunity, the apartheid police took the gang under their wing, offering protection and power. Backed by corrupt councillors, magistrates, and law enforcement or the security forces, the gang operated with impunity. Diti had one goal: to exterminate as many ANC Youth League members as possible, and the police were more than willing to help.
Diti, it is said, was the top man in the 3 Millions, a gang that was seen to be working with the police.
In 1990, after the unbanning of the political parties, a group was formed and it was called the 3 Million. The situation, as from September 1990 until 1992, was sheer hell in Maokeng. I can describe it as hell. Nobody felt safe, even just to walk to his toilet at night.
It is alleged that Diti was responsible for over 20 killings. To cover their tracks, the gang was advised to align themselves with the Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP, a move that would frame their massacres as politically motivated rather than outright criminal, potentially granting them amnesty for their crimes. The 3 Million Gang became a highly organized death squad, operating with military precision. At the top of the chain were the police officers, then the local councillors and IFP officials, who devised attack strategies. Now these plans were then relayed to gang comrades, who controlled 10 lieutenants, each leading a unit of ruthless henchmen. Orders trickled down with cold efficiency, and when the time came, the platoons or the crews moved with deadly intent. Their missions were not random acts of violence. They were calculated strikes designed to eliminate political enemies and spread terror across the township. The 3 Million Gang wasn't just a ruthless death squad. It was also a tool of intelligence gathering and psychological warfare. They spread propaganda throughout the township, sowing confusion and fear among residents. Well informed about the movements of political activists in Maokeng and Kroonstad, the gang easily identified their targets, making assassinations swift and precise. Allegations were going around that the gang's financial and strategic backing came from a network of councillors, white businessmen, and police officers. Now these benefactors ensured that the gang had everything it needed, from transportation, money, and most importantly, weapons. Now councillors reportedly went even further, supplying the gang with addresses and details of activists marked for elimination. It was said that the gang members received a weekly stipend of 500 to 1,000 from the police, and keeping in mind that at the time you could buy a brand new car for like 3,000 to 4,000 rands. Now that payment was blood money for their reign of terror. And the police did more than just bankroll the gang. They stood by and watched them as the 3 Million Gang operatives stabbed and hacked victims to death. One chilling example was the murder of a worker from Premier Milling on the 31st of December in 1990. The killing happened in full view of the police, yet no arrests were made. Enraged workers from Premier Milling decided to take justice into their own hands. They mobilized, marching towards the gang stronghold, determined to retaliate. But as soon as they arrived, they walked straight into a trap. The police were already waiting. Instead of stopping the gang, they turned on the workers, firing tear gas and dispersing the crowd before a single blow could be struck. By April 1991, the violence had reached a breaking point. The ANC organized a march to Kroonstad police station to deliver a memorandum condemning the 3 Million Gang's murderous activities. But the gang's response was swift and brutal. Less than 24 hours later, they unleashed terror at the Kroonstad taxi rank, targeting commuters in broad daylight. The ANC accused the gang of extorting taxi passengers and bystanders, forcing them to pay protection money at knife point, all under the watchful eye of the police. When authorities finally made a move, they arrested 9 gang members, only to release them soon after, without any charges.
Yes, I came around here in 1991 at the height of the fighting. In fact, at the height of their terror, reign of terror here. It was a terrible situation for all the citizens here. Everybody was terrified of them. And Diti, I think at that time, killed about, already ascribed to him, it was alleged at least no less than 22 murders But still, the senior magistrate of that time continued to give him a bail each time he got arrested.
The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, uncovered chilling revelations. Individual councillors were not just bystanders in the township bloodshed. They were architects of it. Feeling threatened by militant youth resistance, some councillors took matters into their own hands, establishing vigilante groups to crush the uprising. Allegations from ANC-aligned structures suggested that, in several cases, councillors went beyond mere sponsorships. They personally supplied weapons, orchestrated attacks, and even took part in brutal assaults against township residents and activists believed to be aligned with the United Democratic Front or the ANC. The TRC also had damning testimonials that some of these death squads were the brainchild of apartheid security forces, operating under the direct command of senior police officers. Magistrates and prosecutors were accused of sabotaging criminal cases against gang members, ensuring that the vigilante groups remained untouchable. The 3 Million Gang was not confined to Maokeng in Kroonstad alone. It extended its reach to Brantford, where it worked in tandem with other vigilante groups, reinforcing their deadly operations. The leaders of these gangs held clandestine meetings with the security branch at the Brantford police station, where they received tactical directives, weapons, and cash, even packs like tobacco and alcohol, straight from the cops. As the violence escalated across Maokeng and other South African townships, it became evident that the government was waging a covert war against ANC-aligned activists and civilians. Vigilante gangs, backed by the state, unleashed terror with impunity. Faced with relentless attacks, the ANC decided to fight fire with fire. In response, the ANC formed the Self-Defense Units, the SDUs, militant groups tasked with protecting ANC members and the broader community. But these were not just defensive forces, they were as violent as the gangs were. The SDUs met violence with violence, and soon vicious clashes erupted between them and the gangsters, who had been propped up by the apartheid regime. The battle for the townships had become a war without rules, where survival depended on who struck first and who struck the hardest. By late 1991 and early 1992, the 3 Million Gang had made too many enemies in Kroonstad. Their reign of terror had reached its breaking point. The self-defense units and the enraged community members were no longer just resisting, they were actively hunting down gang members, determined to wipe them out. In April of 1991, chaos erupted in Maokeng after the gang was suspected of fatally stabbing an 18-year-old pupil. Furious scores of students took to the streets, throwing stones and setting fire to a house belonging to a gang member's brother. The message was clear: the township had had enough. The killings escalated. One night at a local tavern, a confrontation turned deadly. Mulele, a 3 Million Gang member, stormed in with an accomplice and began provoking SDU members, demanding to know where other ANC members were. Then, without a warning, he threw a crate of empty beer bottles at Munyake, who was an ANC member, and his friend. Munyake, already on edge, he snapped. Overcame with rage, he pulled out a knife and lunged. He stabbed him several times, and he also chased him around the tavern as he was running around, and he stabbed him until he collapsed. And when he collapsed, he kept on stabbing him. He was so emotional he even lost count of how many times the knife went into his body. The war on the 3 Million Gang had officially begun. Then came the biggest target of them all, Diti himself. One fateful day, the SDU members spotted him at Kroonstad taxi rank. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Roland Petras pulled a balaclava over his face and closed in. Just as he neared, someone shouted Diti's name. He turned instinctively, just in time to see the gun aimed at him. Roland shot him. Realizing the danger, Diti bolted, weaving through the crowd, but he ran straight into a dead end, a towering fence too high to climb. Trapped, he had no choice. He turned and charged at Petrus in a desperate attempt to fight his way out, but Petrus was faster. He struck first, knocking Diti to the ground. Before he could recover, Petrus raised his hammer and pulled the trigger. A single shot ended Diti's reign of terror.
The February 1992 execution-style killing of its most notorious inhabitant, Diti, ended a 2-year-long reign of terror and fear in Maokeng. He was shot repeatedly by a balaclava-clad man at the local taxi rank.
By die taxi rank het ek na Diti toe gegaan. Terwijl ik op pad naar hem toe gaan, had iemand hem geroepen van achteraf, achter mij. Hij had omgedraaid en hij had straight aan mij gekeken. Toen was het wat ik eerste skot op hem geschiet had. Hij had weggehardlopen, achterom naar aan de achterkant van die taxis van die combis om. Hij had vast in een hoge heinings gehardlopen. Hij kon niet oorgespringen om weg te gaan. Dat veroorzaakt dat hij moet weer terug hardlopen naar mij toe. Hij had naar mij toe gehardlopen in mijn directie en ik had naar hem toe gehardlopen. Ik had hem neergeslaan in de grond. De tijd wat hij neergevallen, toen ik hem daar zo gaan schieten in de koppen.
I'm going to illustrate what joy there was in the community of Maokeng the day when Diti was shot. It was worse than when Nelson Mandela was freed.
At the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, Roland Petrus applied for amnesty. He had been sentenced to 14 years in prison for the murder of Diti, but he maintained his stance. He was not guilty of murder. The 3 Million Gang was a police-backed death squad. So he testified, we had no choice as the ANC allied forces. We had to eliminate them before they eliminated us. And so, with the fall of Diti, the 3 Million Gang, once untouchable, they crumbled.
In my evidence this afternoon, I have said that the previous system have turned our young people into murderers, into to people without any feeling. It is not their mistake. We must put the blame squarely on the previous government, the NP government.
Treacherous is one of 5 ANC self-defense unit members who are in prison for the murders of members of the 3 Million Gang. This week, they asked the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for amnesty. Macheba Tulo was commander of the SDU.
I am applying amnesty concerning the killing of Masusu Albert Ndemo, whom I was part of those people who killed him. And then the motivation is totally political, because the said person was part of the 3 Million Gangsters, which was terrorizing the community and doing all its efforts to eliminate the African National Congress and its alliance. I killed Masusu Ndemo on the 11th of February 1991. Yes, the situation that day was very much tense, see, because the policemen were collaborating with the said gangster, which is 3 Million. It was a situation whereby it's a battlefield, actually, see. And then Masusu confronted me with a knife, a self-made knife. Then he tried to stab me, and then I just moved on the side, and then because he was drunk, he passed, and then he wasn't facing me, I was facing his back, and then I shot him twice, and then he turned to me, then the other members of the self-defense unit who accompanied me and shot him. It was a hail of bullets. Then I made it a point that I went to him and then put the firearm into his mouth and then shot him for the last time. Then he kicked. Then he